Indeed. Thank you very much, Lorna, for that kind introduction. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone tuning in from your various offices and more likely homes around the world. We've got a great panel lined up for you. And I believe all my panelists are now in the room. So this panel is focused on the acquisition of private jets. What does the advisor and ultimately the client, being the ultra high net worth individual most typically for this audience, what do they need to know? I have a great panel here today, and I'll try to introduce them in order that I see them. First, Mr. Gary Dolsky, who's the CEO of Metrojet, Thomas, or Tom Chatfield, who is the CEO of Camber Aviation, Mr. Jared Hasty, who is the Director of Sales at Ogara Jets, Alexandra, or Alex Ash, Miss Alexandra Ash, who's the Director for Europe for Global Jet Capital, Daniel Hall, who's a senior valuation consultant and appraiser at Ascend by Cirium, and Ms. Gwen Edwards, who is a partner at the law firm of CMS Cameron McKenna in London. So welcome to all of my panelists. So just to set the stage really quickly, the last year has represented what I refer to as the single greatest wealth creation event of our lifetimes. And apparently there was a pandemic as well. Part of the consequence of the former fact is that our industry, being the private aviation industry, has seen an influx of new buyers, whether that's buyers who have, for the first time, accomplished a level of success or wealth that are now comfortable acquiring a business jet of their own for the first time, or whether it is a family individual or family that could have always afforded a business jet but just never bothered and preferred to fly commercial through first class or charter. And then, of course, we also have a whole variety of new entrants into the charter market as well. So that's been a welcome turn of events from roughly this time last year when we all quite literally thought the sky was falling. However, I'm glad to report that we in the private aviation industry are still gainfully employed and indeed in many parts busier than ever. So with that background, we are going to proceed with this discussion in what we believe to be the most helpful way, and that's going to involve a little bit of role play. So as introduced, if anyone knows, I'm an attorney by trade, and I represent billionaires and some of their companies. In fact, billionaires representing a combined wealth in the past year of over $300 billion, and a few companies that together had a turnover in 2020 of over $1 trillion. And I'm still learning new things every day in this industry. So, and I believe that the same goes for everyone else on this panel as well. But allow us to impart some of the knowledge that we've gained over the past many years. I believe there's at least over 100 years worth of experience on this panel to you. So to set the stage, as I mentioned, I am going to play the role of the client. Let's just say exactly this time last year when Bitcoin was trading at $5,000, I let it all roll for a couple of $1 million, and now I'm worth, at Bitcoin's value today, $140 million. So I'm your fairly typical crypto bro. But to be interesting fact, we are now seeing crypto wealth acquiring jets as well, but that's a topic for another day. So allow me to start and just simply ask everyone on our panel, what is it that you do and how can you help me? Let me start first with Jared. Jared, what is it that you do and how can you help me?
Sorry, I'm sorry that you said Gary. I hope you said right or no.
Go ahead, Gary.
Okay, sorry, no, did I cut somebody off?
I believe Jared may be off, but please, Gary,
Okay.
go ahead. What is it
Okay,
that
sorry,
you
I
do?
was looking, I didn't see him up, so I apologize for that. I normally don't jump in like that. So anyway, I'm sorry. I'm Gary Dolsky. I'm the CEO of Metrojet, an aircraft management and maintenance company with headquarters in Hong Kong. We're here to take care of our customers. We're here to maintain their planes, fly their planes, help them buy their planes, and fly them all over the world.
Thank you, Gary. Jared, if you're on, I'd really like to know what you do and how you can help me. We may have lost Jared momentarily. Okay.
Yeah, Jared, he's not joining us, Paul.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, he sends his apologies, so sorry about that.
That's okay. Alex, what is it that you do and how can you help me?
Hi, Paul. So I'm Alex. I'm the sales director for Europe for Global Jet Capital. And Global Jet Capital is a leasing specialist who has purely focused on the leasing and lending for business jets and private jets. And I'm based in Zurich and I run their European portfolio. And we could help you purchase a new or pre-owned jet and take care of the structuring and the good deal over the years, let's say. And second thing we can offer is helping you maybe find an aircraft out of our inventory portfolio. We have right now over 160 jets in all kinds of jurisdictions. And sometimes, even though we're not a broker, there is a possibility that one aircraft comes out at that moment when you ask us if we have a jet available, and that we can help you at that end as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Alex. Thomas, what is it that you do and how can you help me?
I'm the CEO of Camber Aviation Management, and we are actually a team of experts. Our core competencies are in maintenance and aircraft outfitting. And basically what we are is the trusted advisor of a client. We're not brokers, and we certainly aren't a completion center. So we basically help that client choose the right type of aircraft that they would like, and then basically guide it through the path of refurbishment or completion. We oversee the outfitting process. We make sure the aircraft is going to be delivered on time and on budget. And once it's certified, we make sure that the entry into service is ready, so that everything's ready to make that client happy with their first flight.
Good to know. Thank you. Dan, what are you bringing to this table?
Hi there, morning from New York. My name's Dan. I'm with Ascend by Cirium. I'm an ISTAT and ASA certified appraiser. So I'm in the valuations and the appraisals space. And what we want to do is we want to help our clients, whether that be the owner, the financier, lessor, really know the true value and the risk associated with the aircraft. We're fully independent, so we don't buy or sell broker aircraft as well, and we want to tell the market how it is from the valuations and the appraisals standpoint.
Thanks, Dan. Now, I wish I had someone to help bring this all together and protect my legal rights. Gwen, what is it that you do?
Well, luckily, I'm a lawyer, so maybe I can help there. I specialise in aircraft finance, leasing, sales and acquisitions. I'm based in London. I would typically help structure any debt financing arrangements, negotiate the sale documents, negotiate the lease or the loan documentation, ensuring that the commercial terms that you agree with the other parties are clearly set out, that they're binding and enforceable, and that the various legal, commercial and operational risks in your acquisition and your ownership and your financing potentially of the aircraft are appropriately mitigated and allocated between the parties. I mean, in short, legal counsel should dismantle the complexity of a transaction for you, and basically create some order and certainty out of the chaos.
That's wonderful, Gwen. That sounds like music to my ears. And I believe I should hire you and pay you your full hourly rate without discount.
Thank you so much.
All right, folks. Well, let's help me walk through this process. Look, at the gate, I'll be honest, I want to determine my budget and whether or not aircraft ownership is actually right for me. I mean, I did do well on Bitcoin, and I've got about $120 million in my bank, and really nothing else, and no other prospects to.
Oh, hello, Ada. It's Alison from the Re-Engage group.
Hi, thank you. So let me start by asking you, Alex. Do you have any thoughts on just whether I should even own an aircraft?
Well, it's not my decision to take for you, but I'm happy to share our knowledge and experience and what we think are maintenance costs, and maybe direct you to the right people to talk to. Our main purpose is to price the aircrafts and send you a simplified structure to lease a deal, lease an aircraft. So what I can help you with is, if you found the aircraft which you feel comfortable traveling with, I can make a high-level indication, and you can use that for your cash flow forecasts. But what we always tell clients who buy, especially for the first time, you have to look at the aircraft as a depreciating asset. So it loses value, unfortunately, and it costs every month as well a lot of maintenance. So we would maybe be able to give you the money, but there are a lot of additional costs. So depending on the aircraft, you have to get really good insight from others here on the panel what the monthly costs are, and if that matches your needs right now. I mean, in the industry, on all the panels we had earlier here, there are as well charter companies or some other players like banks, and you have to really pick the right product for you. And that is really depending on your very specific situation. So congrats on your Bitcoin win, Paul. But I don't know if you have used private aviation before and are now super interested to own. But we always say that owning a jet makes maybe sense when you travel a lot, 200, 300 hours a year. I mean, Global Jet Capital allows you to charter the aircraft out, but I would never tell a client that's a business money you really earn so much money with, you pay everything. So it's always good to have a solid cash flow in your own business, your core business, and take the professionals in our industry, let them take care of your aircraft and the structure around it.
Thanks, Alex. Luckily, unlike aircraft, Bitcoin values only go up.
Yeah. Exactly.
So,
exactly.
I'm comfortable. I've grown tired of flying EasyJet all my life, and I think I've taken the decision, and I'm comfortable with aircraft ownership as the right solution. So, really, the next question for me is, what aircraft, and how do I even begin to identify the aircraft? And I mean, it would be great if I had a broker on this panel, but I'm just wondering if perhaps, maybe starting with you, Alex, do you have any idea how I start to pick what type of aircraft? I mean, I really don't know one from the other.
Well, I'm happy to open my network and introduce you to all our OEM friends, but I think the first question you have to ask yourself is where you're typically traveling. What's the range you need, and what type of aircraft you would love to use. If you always fly to an airport which doesn't have the airport size for a Global 7500, you might have to stop somewhere and take a Pilatus aircraft from there. So it depends on so many criteria. I really would go to a broker and have a good inside view on what your travel route is leading to as an aircraft type, because there are so many beautiful ones out there.
Indeed. Gary, do you have any insights for me on how I pick the type of aircraft? I mean, no less than 2 engines. That's all I know so far.
Okay, that's a good start. And anyways, congratulations on your ability to do stocks much better than I am. And so that's why I would like to be able to manage your aircraft and unfortunately not be sitting in the back with you. But you know, as Alex had said, you know, we would sit down with you. We'd have a comfortable discussion. I'd really want to find out Why do you want to buy an aircraft? How many hours are you going to fly? As Alex has said, where are you going? Are you using it for business? Are you using it for pleasure? Are you going to be going with your friends? Do you have a family that you want to fly with? I want to be able to sit down with you and say, congratulations on spending anywhere from, it could be from 10 million up to 70 million plus on your aircraft. And we'd have to sit down and say, that's just the start of it. And then there's your operating costs. And so the key on our type of a business is we have to help people make an informed decision. And in this instance, there's a difference between needs, wants, and desires. And so there are certain things that may be perfectly fit for purpose for you, but one of your friends may have just invested twice as much as you in the Bitcoins, and they have twice as big of an aircraft that you may want to, keep up with the Joneses. And so my job and our company's job is to be fully transparent on the cost that it's going to be to operate this aircraft. It just starts when you buy it. And as Alex has said, the value is going down all the way. And so as long as we keep you informed, I think that's important on our part. Our job is to fly you safely first and foremost. Okay. And that's the most important thing I think you want to be able to know, is that you get the A to B very safely. And that's absolutely key. There's many companies that can do that. There may be some that don't do it as well as others. And so I would also suggest shop yourself around a bit. Don't just go to the very first place. You know what? There's a lot of people that have been in this industry for a while, and there's some very good competition out there. And so I would strongly suggest test the waters, go to a few people, find out who you're comfortable with, because we want long-term relationships, because you bought this and your Bitcoins are only going up. So you may get a second plane someday, or a bigger one. And we'd like to manage that for you as well.
Thanks for the honesty, Gary. I mean, luckily, I before becoming a Bitcoin multi-millionaire, I was an attorney, so I actually have no friends. So I can just let me ask you, Thomas, do you have any thoughts on what we've been discussing here? I mean, I'm gathering mission profile, destinations, passengers, frequency of use. Anything else that I should know about, or do you think it's been covered?
I think what's really important is that open discussion with a number of people to understand what you want. On one side, we're talking about what is the type of aircraft that you need. The type of aircraft actually fits into exactly the questions that Gary and Alexander say. Where are you flying and what you want to do. But be realistic too when you're talking to your client, because we find in about a third of the cases, the client profile is that he perhaps wants to fly long distances twice a year with his wife, and the rest of the time he's flying regionally with a large team of people. If you were to put that into a context of a car, it would mean you'd have a bus and you'd have a sports car, for example. So it doesn't necessarily work. And in that case, we quite often recommend that somebody gets a fraction and perhaps charters for the balance of it. And that is fine. You don't necessarily need an aircraft. If you do need one, then understand that there's huge differences in terms of buying a new one or getting a pre-owned one. And depending on how much money you have, you can get a lot more bang for your buck by buying a pre-owned aircraft. And I think we'll talk about that later in the session.
That's a great segue, actually, because that was going to be my next thought. I mean, I've decided that I want an aircraft. I think I know the type of aircraft I want. Now I have ever since it got out into the press that I hit it big in Bitcoin, I've had all these OEM salespeople getting in touch with me nonstop, trying to sell me new. Should I go new or used? Tom, do you have any insights on that?
Yeah, actually I do. So there's really 3 points in terms of wanting to go new or used, in my opinion. One is, do you have the budget for it? The second is, do you have the patience? Do you want to wait that 1, 2, or 3 years to actually get your toy? And the third one is, what is your expectation? So if you're buying an aircraft that is brand new from an OEM, let us say Gulfstream or from Bombardier, then you're going to be able to, much like you would for your BMW or your Mercedes, be able to pick various options which they have in their catalog and finishes, and that's what you're going to be getting. And people are comfortable with that process. It's a low-risk process. It works very well. Alternatively, if you want to get a larger aircraft or a pre-owned aircraft, you have the ability basically to reconfigure that aircraft. And as long as it's certifiable, you can change the interior of your aircraft for more seats, less seats, a lounge, an area to sleep in, all kinds of different things. So there's more flexibility there. And the advantage, in my opinion, of a pre-owned aircraft is, to a large extent, it's already being depreciated. You're not taking as big a loss. The aircraft is available in a much, much shorter period of time. And depending on who your completion manager and completion center is, you have an ability to do a fairly large change to that aircraft at a reasonable price. So it reflects what you want.
Thanks, Tom. I wondered, Dan, just coming from a valuations perspective, do you have any particular thoughts on which is going to hold its value better, if at all, over time? Or any other thoughts?
Yeah, I have many thoughts, yes. I mean, I do a lot of work in the commercial aviation world as well. And that is a world which looks very closely at buying the right type of aircraft, operating the right type of aircraft. Sometimes we forget that private aviation is often very irrational, and people are flying an aircraft. They probably should be flying a smaller aircraft. We know that often the average hour cycle ratio is 2 to 1. It's not 16 to 1. We know that often there's 1 or 2 passengers in the back, not sort of 10 to 15. But often the buyers here often have a lot of money and they want to buy what they want to have and not necessarily what they need. And this leads into the new versus used debate, which I love discussing, because there will always be that segment of buyers which will always buy new aircraft. And that's that. And you see them, they buy new, they replace after 3 to 5 years, and that's what they do. But the savvy buyers who buy pre-owned aircraft can really get some fantastic airplanes out there. I mean, I love looking at the old Gulfstream 4, G4, G4SP market, the aircraft which have had interior refurbishments. Honestly, they look pretty similar to a new Gulfstream inside, but they're 20 or 30 years old. So you can, if you work closely with some of the people on this call, there's the plug, you can avoid a lot of risk and for your money get a lot of aircraft. I was just looking today, say you were a buyer with a budget, say $20 million, and you think, oh, okay, I want to buy a brand new super mid-size aircraft, $20 million. Also for $20 million, you can buy yourself a 6 or 7 year old large cabin, ultra long range aircraft. 6 or 7 years old is really not very old in business jet terms. It hasn't done much flying. And if it's enrolled on engine programs, maintenance programs, which we might discuss later, you're minimizing the risk there. Equally, if you wanted to buy a brand new sort of light jet aircraft for sort of $9 or $10 million, for that budget, you could get yourself a 6 or 7 year old super mid-size aircraft. And then you've got US transcontinental range and you've got a bit more size in the cabin. So, but then we forget that a lot of buyers, they don't know these numbers, they don't know values. So really, we always encourage just get the discussion going, and work out exactly what you want. And there's some great opportunities in the pre-owned market. That's what I'll say.
Thanks, Daniel. I remember when I used to be a business aviation attorney, one of my clients who was acquiring a new aircraft for his wife once said to me, Paul, $3 million is not worth me getting yelled at when we were discussing the purchase price. So that goes back to your comment about irrationality. And you're right, the same rules don't necessarily apply. It's interesting what Dan said, though. If I can buy a used aircraft for significantly less cost, maybe I should. But then my question is, and maybe Gary is the best person to answer this, would that end up costing me more in the long run in operating costs? I mean, I'm not talking about a 40-year-old aircraft, but let's say I tap the market for something that's 10 years old, and maybe I then have the interior refurbished. Gary, am I going to be paying a lot more per, what do you guys call it, a flight hour?
Per flight hour. So the answer on that is really going to be based on the particular aircraft that you're buying and the condition that you're buying it. And you know, this is where people like Danielle will come in and they will provide, if you're buying a used aircraft, a pre-purchase inspection. That's very important because you may have an aircraft that looks fantastic, but is just getting ready to go for an 8C inspection versus it has just had an 8C inspection. What really is a concern is how is the aircraft maintained over the life of the aircraft? If it's on some aircraft programs, whether or not it's a plane parts for Gulfstream or Smart Parts or a JSSI program, an engine program, that all adds value to the aircraft. If it isn't on any programs, you may have some surprises. Once you start getting into 7-10-year-old aircraft, what you're now looking at is the potential for corrosion. And that's a very, very nasty word in our business, and that can be very, very expensive. And so if you can get a clean aircraft that has been on programs, that you have a good history on, you want to take a look at the accident history, et cetera, you can still get a very, very good deal on a pre-owned aircraft. And given, Paul, that you're just starting this and you gave us 150 million that you've made, I think to do justice to you, I would probably push you a bit towards looking in today's market, because it is a good market right now and you can get some immediate gratification. And given that you never had an aircraft, I would rather you learn on a lower cost asset to know exactly what you want, to see what your interiors that you want, because rest assured it will be something different. And you may like the purple shag carpets and the orange headliners, but I think Thomas would probably advise you, and probably Gwen as well, that if you're ever going to resell it, you may want to think twice about doing something like that as well.
I love that shag carpet, and I should have mentioned I love to smoke. I chain smoke on my I will be chain smoking all day on my aircraft. I assume that's not going to impact the value at all.
Not at all. And with a whole bunch of dogs and a llama or an alpaca would be nice. Yes.
Of course. Alex, what do you have to say on this new versus used debate?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to refer, before I come to that, to the valuation part, because that's very crucial. So if you have the decision on a specific second-hand aircraft, it's important to talk as early as possible to some of your financing partners, because they might see the valuation slightly different than the broker. And some banks have different strategies, and as well, we have strategies on the age of aircraft, on the tenors we can offer. So I just want to recommend to as early as possible to talk to as many people as possible, like Thomas said, so that you feel comfortable with a few offers you have in front of you and then make the best decision for you. And what Gary just said with the first time buying situation, maybe an operating lease could be a nice way into the industry, because then you don't have to take care of the residual value at the end of the term. And typically the lease tenor might be a bit less long than a loan. I can tell you more about that later, but that's what I wanted to say regarding the evaluations. That's important that everybody is aligned on the second-hand aircraft. And as well, that if you buy for the first time, you don't have to own immediately. There are leasing options out there which might help in that very first purchase.
That is great information to know. I need to talk to my lawyer. Gwen, quick question for you.
Sure.
Between new and used, which one's going to cost me more headache? Are they both quite similar in getting the deal done, or does one tend to be way more complicated than the other?
No, I mean, there are differences at the different steps of the transaction, but in terms of legal principles in buying an aircraft, whether it's new or used, there's not really a difference. You may find if you're buying a used aircraft that there's kind of more up for grabs in terms of what you can negotiate with your counterparty, with your seller. You may find if you're buying from a manufacturer, they've got their standard form of purchase agreements, and obviously there's commercials to be agreed on pricing, on timing, on specification, but not a lot else around that. But that said, it's a different scenario when you're getting a brand new aircraft, when you're getting an aircraft where you need to have a discussion about what condition this aircraft's in and what repairs you might want and what maintenance you think it should have done to it before you should pay a particular price for it. The key parts of buying an aircraft is that you acquire title to that aircraft, and you will have to have that aircraft registered somewhere. That's not going to change between whether it's a new aircraft, whether it's a used aircraft. But what can change is the complexity in the process. So if you're buying a used aircraft, the fact that it is in existence with another owner that's not just the manufacturer, may have had multiple owners beforehand, may have existing financing on it. That's all going to add to the layers of complexity in trying to bring this together to complete the transaction and to acquire a clean aircraft, in that it has clean title, it doesn't have any encumbrances on it, and you get what you're intending to get and what you've agreed in principle to buy.
Thanks, Gwen. So I'm trying to wrap my head around the costs. It seems that the cost of the aircraft acquisition and the ownership is going to range from high to very high, whether it's between the structure, the maintenance, the operating cost, fuel, hangar, crew, training, insurance, all of that. And I'm just wondering, if I were to buy a used aircraft and I want to change some things around, maybe I want to get rid of the shag carpet, or maybe I want to put in shag carpet. Thomas, you seem to be the first port of call here. Am I just going to have to live with whatever I can find on the market, or can I realistically put my own style to it?
You can do quite a bit, but let's take one step back, because I think there was a really good point that both Gary and Gwen raised, and that was when you're going to buy an airplane, and especially a pre-owned aircraft, don't take the first one that you're looking at, because if there's a lot of hidden value in those aircraft, if they, for example, just had the maintenance done, or maintenance is being cleared for a specific period of time, landing gear has to be overhauled, for example, flight decks have to be upgraded. And if you're going to compare apples to apples and compare exactly the same aircraft, you'll see that there's a huge amount of potential value in two different aircraft simply because of their maintenance status and where they are. But in terms of being able to change the interior of that aircraft, again, the aircraft that you start with may have value in it because it has a seating configuration, which is exactly what you want, Paul. And therefore you don't have to spend as much time reconfiguring and certainly money to recertify that. In terms of what you can do on an aircraft, you can't put a swimming pool in it. That's not going to work. But in terms of changing the layout, changing the upholstery, the seating, all of the soft goods, yes, you can do all of that. We can upgrade satellite communication systems so that you're able to do, for example, video conferencing to continuously check on your Bitcoin asset. We can make sure that the galley has been upgraded to be able to reflect your cooking style. Different parts of the world have different cooking styles, and Southeast Asian food does not work very well in a steam oven. It just doesn't taste as good. So you may want to have your own chef on board, or at least be able to cook fresh. So there's quite a bit that you can do. There are limitations based on certification requirements, but we can guide you through that. And it all begins with an open question, what you really want on board.
I appreciate that. Gwen, any further thoughts?
Well, just in relation to, outfitting and reconfiguration of aircraft, and actually more generally into contracts you might enter into with service providers to do that kind of work to it, or to do other kind of maintenance. All too often we see disputes arising in relation to what services have been agreed on, what extras may have been agreed, what the quantum of those costs that have been incurred are, and whether those costs are justified and whether people feel like they should be paying them or not. So I would just say, word of caution, really a plug for lawyers, but really do document those contractual arrangements very clearly and thoroughly, and don't then jeopardize that by inadvertently doing something, saying something that is going to compromise or vary what you've agreed. If there's anything that you're agreeing to that's somehow compromising your position, then you really should check with your legal advisors to make sure that you're protected. You can easily kind of agree something over lunch when much fun was had, but then will you remember that conversation? Will there be a different recollection of what was agreed at the price that someone scribbled on a bit of paper? Really important not to forget about that, because actually sometimes the numbers really do add up, and then if it ends up in a dispute, the numbers really add up after that. And I've been involved in disputes that have arisen over what seemed like really small matters in relation to, you know, an outfitting of an aircraft where someone wasn't happy, but then the escalation of that from what it probably would have cost to correct it if things hadn't have, you know, descended into a dispute, the cost is mount, and it takes so much time as well to resolve.
Thanks, Gwen. So no documenting my outfitting contract on the back of a napkin at Cipriani. Got it.
Yeah, please try and get that documented properly, not just on the back of back of an envelope.
Cipriani.
What we really say is, you know, if you take the time to really document the refurbishment or the completion that you want to do, and you do it well, for a narrow body, it might be a 150-page document, and it does take time, and it is laborious. But once you've got that defined very clearly, and you then go to the completion center, they're able to bid with a much sharper pencil because they don't have to put an extra margin on top just in case things change. And you come to an agreement right at the beginning that if there is a change, it's a change order, which may have an impact on cost and schedule. And by doing that right at the very beginning, you get rid of a lot of the potential for conflict. And Gwen is absolutely right. If it's all covered from a legal perspective and everyone's happy and the contents are good, you're going to get the airplane that you want, and not be involved in a fight before you actually get delivery.
Thanks, Tom. I think I'll make sure that you and Gwen come with me to Cipriani when I met with the outfitting contractor. And as I say, in the Bitcoin world, buy the dip so we can go to Chip. I've got a quick question for Daniel, since we're talking about these changes, and then I want to ask another question to Gary. Daniel, I don't like having too many seats on my plane. You know, I like having my space. If I get rid of a couple of seats, is it really going to impact the value, or can I really just do whatever I want to this thing?
That's a great question, Paul. Please don't do whatever you want. How do we describe this? Values of aircraft. It's important to try and understand what is the norm in the market. So when we look at an aircraft, we want to see something that really doesn't give us any surprises. We want to see an interior finishing style or a configuration that we say, you know what, this is currently operating in the United States, but it can easily transact into Australia tomorrow. That's fine. When we see something that causes us a surprise, there are certain regions of the world which do a lot more personalization on the interior, whether that's the color styles or the layout and the configuration. This is all very well and good and nice for the actual owner and the buyer from new, but it can be really difficult to sell in the second-hand market. There was a great example with a Gulfstream G650. So in the early years of the G650 market, the market was pretty strong, and aircraft were transacting pretty quickly. Some people even managed to transact at a premium to what they bought it for, such was the demand. But there was this one aircraft which always caught my eye. The interior was sort of very, lots of blacks and whites. It was very flashy. It was, you know, kind of nightclub bar style, which was probably seemed like a good idea at the time. It was very fun, but it was quite extreme on the eye, and it wasn't market normal. And this airplane, in effect, took many years to finally transact. And over that point, this is off the top of my head, but it transacted for about 20 million less, or about a third of its value less than if it had transacted when they first put it onto the market and when they first wanted to sell it. And that was because of the completion and the finishing. So finding that buyer who wanted that was very difficult, and it came at a big cost to that owner. So that is key for me. I have to say, I think the manufacturers, I'm not blaming them, but I think they've actually gotten better at steering their clients in the right direction in the process when you're buying a new aircraft. Probably because I've told them enough horror stories of what it means for values. But ultimately, it's up to the buyer. It's up to the buyer at the end of the day. They're paying for it, and sometimes they just get what they want. But that is a very real warning, I'd say.
I appreciate that, and I actually know the aircraft. Gary, any thoughts on what Dan, Tom, or Ben have said?
Well, it'll be a continuous trend on this, but when you take a look, and I would be talking to you saying, what do you want? The other question, an important question, how long do you plan on keeping your aircraft? Which is also very important for see. And I think it was Daniel that said that some people want to keep an aircraft that's always continuously in warranty. So before the warranty goes up in 5 years, you can flip it into things like that. Or some people that 7 to 10 range. And then there's the over 10-year range where the deals are more, but you really have to make sure that everything is maintained well. So one of the things I would want to talk to you about if we had the pleasure of managing your aircraft is it's all the other operating costs. When you realize you're flying 300 hours a year, you may not realize that depending where you're based, that's another $500,000 just about in fuel. If you decide that you want to keep your aircraft in Hong Kong and you try to park it in a hangar, that could be another $500,000 to over $750,000. On top of that, if you want a couple pilots and a flight attendant to work with you, there's another $500,000. So it's very important that we would have that discussion so they knew the full package that you were actually getting yourself involved with, because you've just written a check for 25, 35, or 45 million, or you've had the pleasure of working with Alex and you finance it somewhat differently. But there's all these other costs that you're going to be incurring as well that are going to be adding up. And it's very important that I let you know, and we haven't even talked about the maintenance yet, or the $75,000 to $100,000 worth of insurance that we have to put on it, and the fact that I'll get you the best pilots that are out there, but we're going to have to continue to keep them trained. So really what's important is to have that sit down, and the nice thing that you've been able to assemble here, I guess, Lorna, is the full team of, and we're not here to talk you out of it, but we're trying to talk you into, you need to have this kind of a quorum with a group of experts that are actually here to help you. And I can tell you the players that you have sitting here are those individuals that will do that. And there's many more out there, but let us help you. Let us direct you in a certain way. Let us make sure that you're getting what you want, because in the end, Gwen will do the deal and she'll get paid and she'll be out of it. Thomas will finish all the interior beautifully for you and he'll be out of it. Alex has already financed it. Danielle's done the review and said, I think it's okay. And I'm going to be the one holding the basket here on all these times when you don't like certain things. So I think it's very important that you work with all of these individuals that you're talking with and talk to a good management company so that they're very open with you on what you're really going to be looking at going forward. And we are, believe it or not, here to make your life easy. And so that you can really enjoy that back 40 feet of the aircraft.
Thanks. I thought you all were my friends. I didn't know you guys were going to leave. I got bad news, guys. I've been checking the Bitcoin price and it's down. So I'm definitely going to need some financing, and I'm probably going to have to charter the thing out. Alex, how can you help me? You mentioned the specter of an operating lease, perhaps, or I need some money.
Sure. So yes, I mean, the operating lease product is our core product, but let's look a bit what's in the market in general. So there are debt products, the finance lease and the loans, which are typically provided from retail banks, private banks, and your local trusted partner. And then there are some specialist players like us who would offer the operating lease. The major difference is in the structure and ownership. So the ownership on loans and finance leases is with the actual buyer. So the lender or lessee has the ownership at the end of term and in the loan already from the very beginning. And in the operating lease, we purchase the aircraft for the client, and it will remain our aircraft as well at the end of term. And the aircraft has to be returned in certain return conditions. So I have to piggyback on what Daniel said, because if you have a too crazy interior, then we would like to have the standard interior back at the end of term. So those are as well discussions which should be taken place much earlier. But with a good legal team, those there are no surprises. There will be mentioned in the finance docs how to return the aircraft. So the management company can work on that every year, and we would never leave you alone, by the way, because every year we check that everything is in place, that insurances and everything is taken care of. But coming back to the structure, so in an operating lease, we would typically purchase the whole aircraft purchase price for you. So the leverage is 100% typically. And for a loan or finance lease, it's between 60 to 80% loan to value maybe. So it's a different structure. And as I said earlier, it's always worthwhile checking with several partners how their current strategy is, and what you feel as well comfortable in paying monthly. Obviously, all banks would ask you for the full range of documents to assess your financial situation. And in general, there are so many structures you can pick, from offshore SPVs for the aircraft, or you being the guarantor personally, or maybe your company. So it's important to discuss early that it all matches, due to tax and jurisdictional issues, that you don't run into difficulties later. But we are there to help, and as well Gwen and your advisors from your company, it always makes sense to discuss early that all jurisdictions are disclosed at an early stage, so that you can check the structure and see that everything falls into place when the hectic day of the purchase is happening, and all the things have to happen at the same time, with the inspection and the payout and all of that. So always good to know early.
Thanks. So when in the process should I get in touch with the financing community? And does it differ if it's new, or obviously if it's new, the aircraft's going to have a long lead time, depending on the type and whether I'm buying new from the OEM or new pre-owned. So when should I reach out to you? After I've selected the aircraft and signed everything up, and maybe we're going to close in a couple of weeks, or should I give it a bit more time than that?
No, I would approach as early as you have identified an aircraft. Is maybe time or more stressful if you've already signed the LOI and everything. So when you have short-circled either the new or the used aircraft, just reach out, and based on a spec sheet or the data from the OEM, we can make a high-level indication, and so would my peers in the banking area. And then you can start making your financial calculations, if that makes sense, with the other costs occurring at the same time. And then we try to manage the process accordingly, that all these fees which occur after you have decided to go along with a specific product, be it a loan or a lease, that you know exactly what's coming next, what is happening, and for which costs your funds will be used, and that will all lead then hopefully in the successful acquisition of the aircraft for you.
Thank you, Alex. Gary, do you have any thoughts on what Alex has just mentioned?
I'm in full agreement with her. What I would add, though, is I think the sooner you actually go and talk to your finance person, even before you have selected a specific aircraft, my personal opinion is it's better. It's nice to know what you can afford. It's nice to know that if you want to put an LOI on an aircraft, if you went in and did an LOI on an aircraft without getting your financing first, depending if it's a really good deal, if a lot of people are interested in it, you may only have a very short window to be able to get your financing, and that can play against you. One, you may not be able to get the financing in time, or two, you may be paying a premium to get that financing in time. So anytime that you can get together with your financing people beforehand to say, this is the window, this is how much I'm looking at, I think it just puts you in a much better position to negotiate and get a better deal.
Thanks, Gary. I got another question for my lawyer. This all sounds really complicated. I mean, how can you help me to decipher how I'm supposed to own and operate this thing? I mean, I usually just like to put everything in my personal name.
Well, I mean, there's no one right answer for everyone, and it really does involve looking at your particular circumstances, your business, and how you're going to be using the aircraft. Are you going to be using it for private operation, just you traveling in it for pleasure? Is it going to be used as part of your business for business travel? It's pretty rare to actually own the aircraft in your own personal name. You would usually own through a company for reasons of tax efficiency, for reasons potentially of needing to have financing for the aircraft, and depending on the type of financing, it might need to be a the aircraft might need to sit within a company that is clean, quote unquote, that is a newly incorporated special purpose vehicle. It's common to see special purpose vehicles from different offshore jurisdictions used. Again, the tax planning around that will very much depend on your circumstances, your domicile and your companies, and how those are going to play into the ownership structure. But like we've been saying about the financing, no time is too soon to be thinking about that, because these things can take time to put in place. You don't want to make a rush decision and go the wrong way with it. You want to have time to make a properly informed decision and get the right advice. And we're talking potentially about different jurisdictions here. So you may be speaking to a number of advisors in different jurisdictions about that. And then also then as a private owner of an aircraft, it's unlikely that you're going to have the ability, the capability to actually operate and manage that aircraft yourself. You do get some owner operators, but they're more rare, I think. And so you will need third parties to help you operate that aircraft. You will need people to maintain that aircraft for you. And so you will have to factor that into it as well. You will need to put in place contractual arrangements with them. You'll need to, say, lease your aircraft from your company that owns it to an operating company. And now, depending on jurisdiction, depending on the regulations of how you're going to be operating that aircraft or how you want to operate that aircraft, there may be different ways that has to be done. So it can be very complicated. It varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but it's not worth scrimping on in terms of the advice and the time that you take to make those decisions.
Paul, we're running out of time. In fact, we're out of time. Do you want to conclude?
No. Yes.
No.
It's been I was hoping we'd get a bit more time to go into the break, but we have so much to talk about. But look, I think at the end of the day, what this panel has demonstrated is that there are individuals that are experts in their field, and one of the most important things about this process when advising your client is to put together the team of advisors, and that's from the attorney to the financier to the operator to the valuations expert to the outfit consultant, to everybody in between, and a broker. But I hope everyone's found that session useful. There is about 100 years of experience in the substance which you just received, and we can go on for another hour, but I just want to take a moment and thank the panel. They've been excellent. I feel like I'm better informed, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to answer the one question that was in the panel, but I'll email the individual separately with an answer.
Excellent. Yeah, well, thank you, Paul. Thank you, the panel. And I'm personally devastated to hear that I can't have a swimming pool in my private jet, but compensated for to know that I can have a shag pile carpet. So that's all good to hear. But
the water.
Well, you actually could get the swimming pool, you just couldn't fly.
Okay. Oh, well, I'll bear that in mind. Thank you. I'll come back to you on that.
You don't put the water in it.
There you go. Okay.
Good luck with your purchase.
Cheers.
Anyway, Paul, thank you very much to all our panelists. So now we're due for another break. It'll be 37-minute break before our next session. And when we come back at 1600 hours Central European time, we're going to hear about the future for the luxury traveller in Pure Grenada, Spice of the Caribbean. Alison, over to you.
Yes, so just to say, well, thank you for this panel, and the previous panel were both excellent once again. So as Lorna said, the next session we're taking you to Grenada. It's all sponsored by the Grenadian Tourism Authority. So we've got about 25 minutes now. So have a cup of tea and then we'll see you back then. Thank you all very much. Cheers, Em.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.